My wife accused me of cheating every time I talked to another woman, so we turned to therapy. Unfortunately, it didn't work. Then, she slept with another man to show me how it feels. I'm 30 years old, and I met my wife, Claudia, a pseudonym, when I was in college studying business economics. She was 28 years old then, studying English. We first connected at a mutual friend's house, and things clicked between us. After dating for a couple of years, we both graduated, and I proposed. She said yes immediately, and we've been married for 4 years now. Around a year into our marriage, I started noticing changes in Claudia's behavior. It began after she unexpectedly walked in on me talking to a female colleague at a bar. It was a harmless situation, just a group of coworkers having drinks after work. As people left one by one, it ended up being just me and my colleague when Claudia arrived with her friends. She stormed in, threw her purse down, and confronted me aggressively, accusing me of cheating on her. I tried to explain, but she didn't listen. After she finally calmed down, I showed her that nothing inappropriate had happened. Despite this, she continued to accuse me whenever I interacted with other women. Desperate to salvage our relationship, we sought therapy, hoping it would help rebuild trust. Unfortunately, the sessions didn't resolve our issues. Frustrated and feeling misunderstood, Claudia decided to sleep with another man, believing it would make me understand her pain. This betrayal has left me questioning our marriage. Despite my efforts to reassure Claudia of my faithfulness, her insecurity and actions have strained our relationship deeply. I'm unsure how to move forward, torn between my love for her and the hurt caused by her actions. I also showed her photos from earlier that night, pointing out how I hadn't reacted strangely when she arrived with her friends. I hoped my explanation would make it clear that I hadn't done anything wrong. Eventually, she seemed to understand and said, "Okay." There was a brief pause, as if she wanted to say something more before she walked into the room. That incident bothers me to this day because she never apologized for accusing me so harshly. More significantly, that moment marked a shift in her behavior towards becoming clingy and excessively jealous. I began noticing mood changes if I even glanced at another woman or answered simple questions from them, like giving directions. Oddly, these rules didn't seem to apply to women who were obviously not a threat. I believe a reasonable amount of jealousy is normal and healthy in a relationship, as it helps maintain boundaries. However, Claudia's jealousy became excessive after that incident, which puzzled me because there was no basis for her mistrust around other women. Sometimes I can tell she's upset by a shift in her mood after an interaction with another woman. However, it's not every time that she confronts me about it. When she does, it's never a calm discussion. Emotions always run high. It frustrates me greatly because she often cites minor incidents as reasons for her suspicions. For instance, there was a time she caught me talking to a female neighbor in our apartment building hallway about basic politics. We were simply chatting, but when Claudia walked out of our apartment and saw us, it led to... I walked back in and immediately knew I was in trouble. In that moment, I even considered divorce because living under such scrutiny was incredibly draining. However, I believed it was worth trying couples therapy before making any decisions. I love Claudia deeply, so we gave therapy a shot, and initially, it did help. But things took an unexpected turn when Claudia felt the therapist was siding with me too often. She even suspected the therapist of having ulterior motives, thinking they were trying to seduce me. I couldn't help but laugh when she expressed that concern, though it didn't exactly diffuse the situation. We eventually switched to a male therapist, which allowed the sessions to continue longer. Over time, it seemed like the therapy was making a difference. We went months without any incidents. Things seemed normal again, reminiscent of our earlier days before the jealousy took over. However, everything changed when Rebecca, the same colleague from the bar years ago, visited our home to deliver some documents. I wasn't there at the time, as I was supposed to be working from home that week. When I returned, Claudia recognized Rebecca, and all hell broke loose. She started shouting the moment I walked through the door, throwing documents in my face. She demanded explanations. Claudia demanded to know why Rebecca knew our address. Before I could respond, she accused me of bringing Rebecca home to sleep with her. In reality, I had simply told Rebecca where I lived so she could drop off the documents. Claudia's anger escalated, targeting Rebecca's appearance and insinuating that I preferred women who were more endowed than she was. She even threatened to get tested for STDs, convinced I had been unfaithful countless times. After her tirade, I walked into the house, packed a few essentials, and left. I knew there was no point in trying to reason with her in that state. Her emotions clouded any chance of a rational conversation. Leaving seemed like the best option. As I walked out, I heard her shout after me, accusing me of enjoying Rebecca's bed now. This incident happened recently, and since then, I've been staying in a hotel. I've made up my mind to file for divorce because I can't envision spending more decades of my life with someone who constantly accuses me of infidelity. However, I'm conflicted because I know therapy sessions did provide some help. I'm unsure whether I should give therapy another chance with her, or if it's time to walk away for good. I'm seeking advice and thoughts on this decision. Your opinions would be greatly appreciated. I'm starting to lean towards letting go of our relationship. I fear that despite our efforts in therapy, it only takes one trigger for her to revert to her overly jealous behavior. While I may not file for divorce immediately, I'm more open to the idea now than ever before. If this happens again, I think I'm done. Living like this isn't sustainable, and I'm tired of feeling so restricted. I don't want to have regrets, so I'll give her one final chance. If it happens again, that's it for me. I'm not very optimistic, though, and I'm beginning to mentally prepare myself for the possibility of being single again. It is what it is. Update. Well, here's an unexpected update that has me absolutely furious. As I mentioned in my last post, I was considering divorce, but wanted to give her one more chance. Unfortunately, it quickly became clear that she's not going to change, and she made sure to show me in the most blatant way possible. The tipping point came at a friend's barbecue, where I noticed her being unusually touchy-feely with someone we didn't know. When I asked the host, who is a good friend of mine, he informed me that the guy was recently divorced and worked in construction. This behavior was completely out of character for my wife, especially given the events just 2 weeks prior that I described in my last post. I kept a watchful eye on her during the barbecue and opted not to create a scene. It wasn't until we got home that I confronted her about her behavior. Her response shocked me. She showed no remorse and even said, "Well, now you know how it feels." It left me speechless because she essentially admitted to intentionally flirting with that guy to provoke jealousy in me. It was a ridiculous comparison since I've never reciprocated when other women approach me innocently. She even went further, asking if I was jealous because he was more attractive and fit than me. At that point, I couldn't contain my anger any longer. I walked out because I felt the urge to lash out physically. She said nothing as I left, and in that moment, I decided to contact a divorce lawyer. I didn't return home for 3 days. Ironically, even if I had been uncertain, she solidified my decision the next day. A friend named Bill, who hosted the barbecue, called me and asked to meet urgently. When we met, he revealed that the guy my wife was flirting with had contacted him. According to Bill's friend, they had hooked up the day after I left, and Claudia had claimed she was single. They had sex, and Claudia presented herself as single to the man. What's worse, I might never have known if the guy hadn't approached Bill about it. My head was spinning. I didn't know how to react in that moment. Bill could see I was distracted and patiently waited for me to refocus. He explained that he informed the guy about Claudia's marital status, and the guy was genuinely surprised. Apparently, Claudia had given no indication of being married. The guy quickly decided to forget about her. After hearing all this from Bill, I hurried home to confront Claudia. I hadn't rehearsed what I would say. Anger was my only guide. As I walked back into the house, Claudia wasn't exactly in a somber mood. She was oddly chatty, which was unusual given the circumstances. Her first words were, "Didn't expect to see you back so soon," accompanied by a smug grin. It was clear she was trying to provoke me, and unfortunately, it worked. My response was curt and direct. "Shut up. You slept with a guy from the barbecue. Don't even think of denying it. You cheated on me, Claudia." She stood there silently for a moment before sheepishly muttering, "Now you know how it feels." Her words came out almost as a whisper, and I could tell she realized how foolish they sounded. In a fit of anger, I threw one of our ceramic kitchen ornaments at her feet. I'm not proud of my actions, but I was furious. Her comment struck me as absurd because I've never come close to cheating on her. For her to see this as some form of retaliation was beyond comprehension. I can't recall my exact words afterward, but I know there was a lot of cursing, screaming, and attempting to reason with her. I distinctly remember telling her that her accusations were baseless and that she was overreacting to innocent interactions I've had with women. I called her delusional for thinking I had ever shown any signs of unfaithfulness. I pointed out that every incident she cited as proof of my infidelity was simply her misinterpreting normal interactions. Despite her countless accusations, she never had any concrete evidence. I told her she needed professional help. That moment was when I finally unleashed all the frustration I had bottled up. When I finished, she didn't say a word. She just stood there, shaking her head slightly when I asked if she had anything to say. Eventually, I told her to pack a few things and leave. She hesitated briefly before heading to the bedroom. About an hour later, she emerged with a suitcase packed, and I haven't seen her since. This time, I don't need any guidance on what to do next. I've already contacted a divorce lawyer, and I'm determined to ensure she feels the consequences of her actions. I've endured far too much, and I'm exhausted and infuriated that it had to come to this. To all of you, once the divorce is finalized and I know where I stand. Update 2. I'm incredibly relieved to write this update. I feel like a massive weight has been lifted off my shoulders. I genuinely feel great. Previously, I shared about my marriage with an extremely jealous wife who constantly accused me of infidelity or being interested in other women. When she intentionally tried to make me jealous by sleeping with the same person, it was the final straw for me. I immediately contacted a divorce lawyer, and the process moved swiftly. I ensured she was served the divorce papers at her workplace, where she works at a publishing company, so I'm sure it stirred up some workplace gossip. She sent me an angry text that evening, accusing me of embarrassing her and being vindictive. Fast forward to the divorce proceedings. I made a major mistake. I had no solid evidence that she cheated on me. I didn't have recordings of my conversation with my friend Bill or the affair partner's confession. I tried to get Bill to help, but it wasn't feasible. However, I managed to convince them based on the history of her jealousy, our failed couples therapy, and my truthful account of events. She attempted to spin the story in her favor from the beginning, but her version was transparently false. Thankfully, I received a very favorable outcome in the end. I was granted ownership of the house, which was fair as it was my residence before she moved in. There was no requirement for alimony, despite my higher income, as the difference wasn't significant enough, and the judge didn't want to reward her behavior. Fortunately, we didn't have any children together, which was a relief. I was glad not to have any ties left with her. I also feel like I got off lightly because I agreed to let her keep several pieces of furniture and appliances from the house. Mainly, I didn't want reminders of her around. So, that's it. I'm finally free from her. As painful as it is to have spent years being accused of cheating, only to be cheated on in the end, I'm relieved to know it's all behind me now. Now on to the next chapter. Story 2. I initially thought my son was jealous of my new stepson because I took him out to sporting events. It turns out my son Mark, 15, and stepson Luke, 14, are of similar age. Mark, who was very close to his late mom, found it challenging to open up. Fortunately, my sister SL has been a great figure in his life, sharing similar interests and spending quality time with him whenever she babysits. A few years ago, I met Laura, 37, who's a single mom to Luke, as his dad has never been involved. Since Laura introduced me to Luke, we've bonded well. Laura had sisters and her dad passed away when she was a teenager. Luke shares many of my interests, which initially led to some conflicts. I've tried taking Mark to football matches a few times, but he simply isn't interested. May has looked after Mark on occasions when I attended football games a couple of times a year. Luke, on the other hand, was thrilled to join me, being a big fan himself, especially of football. Recently, May pulled me aside and expressed that Mark seemed very jealous of Luke spending alone time with me. She requested that I not attend a Formula One event with Luke next weekend. Despite asking Mark if he wanted to go, he showed no interest. While they are good friends, Mark felt like I favored Luke, which broke my heart. Even though Mark doesn't join me for football, I make a point to take him to events he enjoys, like West End shows and concerts of his favorite artists. I explained to May that while I understood Mark's feelings and tried talking to him about it, it wouldn't be fair to disappoint Luke, who has been eagerly looking forward to the upcoming event. May insisted I prioritize my own son and warned that my actions could strain our relationship. Her words struck deep, leaving me uncertain. I'm seeking advice on whether I've been too focused on Luke and if there's an element of toxic masculinity in my emphasis on sports and racing. It's not about favoring Luke over Mark, but rather trying to balance their different interests and needs fairly. Stop doing things exclusively with Luke. It's not a black and white situation. What you need to do is give your own son the attention he needs, rather than focusing solely on your desire for a mini-me. Why should Mark have to do all the work here? It's not fair to leave it up to him to come up with activities. As his father, it's your responsibility to actively pursue interests he enjoys. Dismissing his interests won't solve anything. You don't have to do things you dislike, but you should be working to find common ground with Mark. He's 15 years old, and it seems like you've given up on him now that you have the son you always wanted. That's unacceptable behavior, and you need to change course. Oh my God, find out what your son likes and engage with him. Learn about his interests. Figure out how to enjoy them together. The goal is to spend quality time with him doing things he loves, not forcing him to enjoy your hobbies just to get your attention. Your son lost his mother, and now you're emotionally neglecting him because you found a connection with your stepson. Both boys deserve better than you as a role model. This is a heartbreaking situation. I think you should listen to your sister and start prioritizing your son's needs. As you've said yourself, you haven't matched his energy for his interests. Instead of going to the Formula One event with Luke, consider spending some one-on-one time with Mark. Take him out for dinner or plan a weekend getaway. If you don't start putting your son first, your relationship with him will continue to suffer into adulthood. Update. First of all, I want to thank everyone who commented. Some of the feedback. The comments I received were judgmental and hurtful, but I acknowledge that most people thought I was in the wrong. Rather than defend myself, my priority was to mend things with my son, Mark. I spoke to him and started by expressing how much I loved him, emphasizing that there was nothing about him I would change. I reminded him that he inherited all the qualities I adored in his mother. Mark seemed puzzled by my words and asked where this was coming from. I confessed that I had heard he was feeling jealous about the time I spent with Luke one-on-one. I reassured him that I never intended to make him feel abandoned by spending time with Luke. He looked a bit embarrassed and assured me he didn't feel abandoned or jealous of Luke. When I mentioned May's concerns, Mark visibly cringed. He admitted he was indeed jealous, but not of Luke, rather of me. He explained that Luke had been incredibly kind to him from the start, and he was excited to have a friend like him. Mark shared that most of his friends from school and clubs were girls, and he wanted to spend more time hanging out with Luke one-on-one, but was unsure how to approach it. Feeling relieved, I asked if he had talked to Luke about spending more time together. Mark confessed he hadn't, unsure of how to initiate it without feeling awkward. I asked what they had in common, and Mark mentioned they both liked similar video games, music, and films TV shows. I suggested buying them tickets to an upcoming film they both wanted to see, and offered to get tickets for any concerts or gigs they might be interested in attending together. Mark was really happy with that suggestion, and Luke and Laura were equally pleased, especially Laura. She had been concerned about Luke's social circle, given his limited friends, and had worried about how he would adjust to blending families. It turned out that both boys wanted to be better friends with each other, but each was hesitant to express it, fearing rejection. Reading all the positive comments and messages in response to my update, I have to admit I was initially scared that I had messed up big time. However, I'm over the moon that everything worked out well. It's clear that going to Mark and checking in with him was the right thing to do. There's nothing wrong with checking in and ensuring he's okay. Once he understood the reason behind my inquiry, he felt comfortable sharing his true feelings. It's made me realize I should check in with my son more often.